The surrender of the soul, December 23, 1945, 14 o'clock hours. Mejiro Police Station, Tokyo. A freezing gray sleet cuts through the shattered remains of the ward. Tokyo is a graveyard of charred timber and twisted steel, the skeleton of an empire stripped bare by firebombing. Inside the Mejiro Police Station, the air is thick with the smell of damp wool, stale cigarette smoke, and the metallic tong of rusted iron. Tokugawa Iemasa stands in the center of the room, his breath visible in the unheated air. He is a man of immense dignity, the 17th head of the Tokugawa clan, the family that ruled Japan as shoguns for 2.5 centuries. But today, he is just another defeated subject in an occupied land dot in his hands, wrapped in plain cloth to hide its terrifying beauty. Rests the Honjo Masamune. This is not merely a weapon. It is a national treasure, declared so in 1939. It is the physical embodiment of the shogunate's authority. Forged by Goro Nyudo Masamune, the greatest swordsmith in human history, sometime in the 13th century. For 600 years, this blade has sliced through armor and bone, survived the fiery siege of Osaka Castle, and been passed down from shogun to shogun. It is said that Masamune blades are so perfectly balanced that they possess a spirit of their own, a calm clarity that refuses to cut the innocent. But the Americans do not care about spirits. They care about disarmament. General Douglas MacArthur's occupation forces have issued a sweeping directive. All weapons, including ceremonial swords held by private families, must be surrendered. To the GIs of the 7th Cavalry, these are souvenirs. To the Japanese, this is a spiritual amputation. Iemasa steps forward toward the chaotic intake desk. The room is piled high with Gunto mass-produced officers' swords, tossed carelessly into heaps like scrap metal. But Iemasa does not toss the Honjo. He waits. A sergeant from the U.S. 7th Cavalry looks up, chewing gum, his face obscured by the shadow of his helmet. The soldier is tired. He has processed hundreds of weapons today. He gestures impatiently for the bundle. Iemasa hesitates. He tries to explain in broken English the significance of what he is holding. He is not just surrendering steel. He is handing over the Excalibur of the East. He presents the sword along with 14 others from the Tokugawa family armory. The sergeant grabs a clipboard. He scribbles a name on the receipt, the graphite scratching loudly against the paper in the sudden silence of the room. The name, he writes, is Coldy Bimore. It is a name that does not exist. It is a phonetic mangling, a ghost name, scrawled by a man who perhaps misheard his own rank or name, or whose handwriting was so hurried it became a riddle for the ages. Iemasa watches as Coldy Bimore takes the Honjo Masamune. The soldier does not inspect the blade. He does not see the Hammond, the temper line that looks like drifting clouds. He does not notice the perfect curvature or the lack of a signature on the tang, the hallmark of the master Masamune who felt his work needed no name. The sergeant simply turns and tosses the finest sword ever made onto a pile of generic weaponry in the back of a waiting truck. The engine of the U.S. Army truck roars to life, coughing black smoke into the winter air. The gears grind. As the vehicle lurches forward, tires splashing through the mud of the Mejiro courtyard, the Honjo Masamune begins its journey into oblivion. It is headed for a weapons depot in Akabun, a vast graveyard of steel intended for destruction. But the sword will never reach the melting pot. Somewhere between the police station and the depot, or perhaps from the depot to a ship bound for San Francisco, the trail goes cold. The truck fades into the heavy Tokyo mist, carrying a king's ransom in a bed of scrap metal. The Sea of Steel, January 1946. The Akabane Engineering Ordnance Depot. North Tokyo. The truck from Mejiro groans as it backs into the muddy expanse of the Akabane Depot. It is a landscape of industrial desolation. Under the harsh glare of floodlights, steam rises from the engines of bulldozers, pushing mounds of metal across the frozen earth. To the uninitiated, this looks like a scrapyard. To a historian, it is a crime scene. The tailgate drops with a deafening clang. A detail of young American GIS, shivering in their field jackets, begins unloading the cargo. They work with the efficiency of boredom. They grab handfuls of shinganto, the mass-produced, oil-stained swords of the Imperial Army, and heave them onto existing piles that tower 10 feet high. Somewhere in this tangled avalanche of steel slides the Honjo Masamune. It clatters against a rusted Type 99 machine gun. It's ancient, hand-polished steel hidden beneath the unassuming wooden shirosaya storage scabbard. In this chaotic graveyard, the weapon that once symbolized the divine right of the Tokugawa Shoguns is indistinguishable from a factory-stamped piece of iron. Made in 1944. The orders at Akabine are contradictory. Some directives call for the total destruction of Japanese military capability. Swords are to be bent by hydraulic presses, melted down, or loaded onto barges to be dumped into the deepest trench of Tokyo Bay. Other orders, however, allow for war trophies. Every soldier returning stateside is permitted one souvenir sword, provided they fill out the requisite mimeograph tag. This is where the mystery of Coldy Bimore deepens into a maddening puzzle. Military archivists and historians have since scoured the rosters of the 7th Cavalry and the occupying forces. There was no Sergeant Coldy Bimore. There was no Coldy Bimore. The name on the receipt was a ghost, phonetic mangling by a Japanese police officer struggling with English. Or perhaps a hasty scrawl by a soldier who simply didn't care. Was it CPLD Gilmore? SGT Colmore? The identity of the man who signed for the blade has evaporated, leaving only a single, terrifying possibility. The sword was not destroyed. If the Honjo Masamune had been thrown into the bay, it would be lost to the salt and silt forever. But the Coldy Bimore receipt suggests a transfer of custody. A claim. As the weeks pass at the depot, thousands of crates are hammered shut, destined for San Francisco, Seattle, and San Diego. Inside one of these pine boxes, nestled between wool blankets and looted flags, the Honjo Masamune likely began its silent voyage across the Pacific. It was no longer a national treasure. It was now item number 45B, a curios for a mantelpiece in a suburban American home, destined to sit beneath a mounted deer head or gathering dust in an attic. Its new owner completely oblivious to the fact that they possessed the holy grail of Japanese steel. The Sleeping Dragon, October 14, 2013. A humid afternoon in Kyoto. Inside the archives of the Kyoto National Museum, a researcher adjusts his white gloves and sighs. For decades, the Japanese government, the Tokugawa family, and private collectors have chased ghosts. They have scoured auction catalogs in London, cold-called pawn shops in Nevada, and interviewed aging veterans in nursing homes across the American Midwest. They have found nothing. The trail of Coldy Bimore evaporated the moment that truck left the Mejiro Police Station. But the silence surrounding the Honjo Masamune suggests a specific agonizing fate. It was not melted down. If it had been destroyed, there would likely be a record of the bulk disposal of the 14 Tokugawa blades. Instead, the other swords from that specific bundle have surfaced, occasionally appearing in museums or private collections, proving the lot was dispersed, not destroyed. The Honjo Masamune is surviving in the most effective camouflage known to man: anonymity, because the sword was surrendered in a shirosaya, a plain, unadorned wooden storage scabbard that resembles a simple walking stick or a piece of unfinished lumber. It looks remarkably unimpressive to the untrained eye. It lacks the gold-leafed tsuba, handguard, a silk-wrapped hilt, or the leather combat covers of the cheap military gunto swords that G is loved to collect. To a soldier from Iowa or Brooklyn in 1945. The Honjo Masamune looked like a stick. It looked like junk. The attic, an undisclosed location in the American Rust Belt. This brings us to the sword's most likely resting place. It is not in a high-tech vault or a villain's fortress. Imagine a cramped attic in a suburban home, perhaps in Ohio, Texas, or Nebraska. The air up here is stiflingly hot in the summer, smelling of fiberglass insulation and decaying cardboard. The only light comes from a single bare bulb that is rarely turned on. Here, amidst boxes of yellowing National Geographic magazines, broken Christmas ornaments, and a moth-eaten army uniform from 1945, sits a plain wooden case. It is wedged behind a stack of old tires. Spiders have spun webs across the cracked timber of the scabbard. The wood is stained with water damage from a leaky roof. The family living downstairs has no idea what it is. To the grandchildren of the man who brought it home, it is just Grandpa's old stick or a weird piece of wood he kept from the war. They might have almost thrown it out during the last spring cleaning. Inside that humble wooden casing, in the pitch black of the scabbard, the steel is still alive. The blade, forged 700 years ago by Masamune, remains capable of splitting a hair floating in the air. The Hammond the temper line, composed of martensite crystals, still glows with the brilliance of a starry night, waiting for a light source it hasn't seen in 80 years. This is the tragedy of the Honjo Masamune. It is not lost in a shipwreck at the bottom of the ocean. It is lost in the banality of a suburban closet. Every few years, a Masamune sword resurfaces. In 2014, a sword brought to the Kyoto National Museum was confirmed to be the Shimazu Masamune, missing for 150 years. It had been in a private collection, unwanted and unrecognized. This discovery proved that the Honjo is likely still out there, somewhere in America. A man named Coldy Bimore, or his descendants, holds the soul of the samurai in a cardboard box, waiting for an appraisal that may never come. Until that day, the finest sword ever created remains a prisoner of dust.